Just over a week ago, Azerbaijan began bombing the ethnically majority Armenian region of Nagorno-Karabakh, or the Republic of Artsakh. This conflict has been widely misreported on in the news, with apparently neutral headlines like violence erupts, clash escalates. It doesn't acknowledge the ample evidence that the aggressor in the situation is clearly Azerbaijan with the help of Turkey. We wanted to put a little bit of good information out there and provide you with some places you can go to support the rights and abilities of Armenians in Artsakh and Armenia to defend themselves. You can check the links in the description for more information on how to do that, as well as more resources to educate yourself on the issue. In this little off-day episode, Leo and Randy, with guest and Leo's partner, Hasmik Djoulakian, talk about the conflict in Artsakh and Armenia and the aggression from Turkey and Azerbaijan that's being perpetrated against Armenians. You're mostly going to hear us talk about problems with media coverage, but we encourage you to go to the documents that we've linked because in order to really understand the issue, you need to read a little bit about the history, the Soviet history, the post-Ottoman history, the Artsakh independence movement in the 90s, the war in the 90s, the following 2 decades of intermittent conflict. And here's a trigger warning because this discussion is going to involve xenophobic and genocidal violence and war in general. Don't, if this is your first time listening, don't go to our Patreon. Go to the links in the description where you can donate to help Armenia and Artsakh. And one more thing. If you found this information to be helpful and informative, please share this with as many people as possible. The reason we're making this is to get people to talk about it. Thank you. Here's our conversation.
Wikipedia was my first source about this, besides what Leo had told me over the past couple of days, and even Wikipedia is being used to kind of implicate Armenia as the aggressor in this, which that nationalinterest.org, they lay it out pretty clearly that Armenia doesn't have a good reason. They're not in a position to be instigators in this. The West is arraying a lot of powerful machinery against Armenia right now, especially the media, and they do have a stake in ignoring it and in allowing misinformation to spread.
Yeah.
Which is why we think we should be doing this, even if it's just a small contribution on a small platform.
Absolutely. You've pointed out importantly that Armenia has no reason to be the aggressor in this situation, and also that Azerbaijan's actions are like ethnically charged, and their alliance with Turkey is ethnically charged against Armenia. We have this quote from Ilham Aliyev, who is the president of Azerbaijan, that the military exercises that they've been conducting leading up to this, which, yes, they were preparing for this, it was premeditated. He says this of those exercises: they coincided with the Tovuz incident. Armenia should think about whether it was a coincidence or not. These drills once again demonstrate Turkish-Azerbaijani unity. There are only 80 kilometers, 49 miles, between the Azerbaijan-Armenian border in Nakhchivan and Yerevan, capital city of Armenia. Armenia knows it, and this intimidates them. It doesn't get more explicit than that. All right, this is not an accident. It's not ambiguous what's going on. Don't kid yourself thinking that Turkey wasn't planning with Azerbaijan beforehand. There's a lot at stake here, and it's not like it. And just so if you hear somebody talk about it, in a way that is ambiguous, please point them to the article that we're linking in the description and other sources if you found them. And also, if you don't hear people talking about it, share this information, because it's at least harder for misinformation to persist when there's also good information out there. people who care. I hope.
Do you want to point out about the equivocation?
Yes. So there's lots of equivocation going on, right? There's equivocation by people who don't really know what they're talking about, where because they don't really have the details on the conflict, they can sort of get off as like, well, I'm providing nuance. I heard a guy on the Michael Brooks show, which I usually trust, say, go through a list of all of the ethnic groups in the Caucasus as his intro to this topic, and then say something like, and then proceed for 14 minutes to talk very vaguely about history without filling in any details. Why was Artsakh made part of Azerbaijan in the first place? What was the political motivation behind that? Doesn't mention it. This kind of equivocation where you don't know details and therefore you present an incomplete narrative is dangerous. Even more dangerous is what the media is doing. It's a type of equivocation that just blatantly ignores established facts. There's no reason that a headline about Armenia, a headline that goes something like Azerbaijan and Armenia are fighting should exist, framed in this neutral way, when we know who started the fighting. Media rely heavily on the statements of politicians and diplomats when they present their narrative of the situation. That means if they're presenting a neutral narrative, they should have neutral sources, right? They certainly present their sources as neutral. I'm going to play a clip from Matthew Bryza, who was on BBC Global News podcast late last week to talk about the issue. Here's what he had to say.
I think something happened, maybe an accident, maybe a provocation by one side or the other, that led to the opening of Pandora's box. We will never know who shot first.
Here's how the BBC introduced him.
Matthew Bryza was the US co-chair of the OSCE Minsk group, which has been trying to negotiate a solution to the conflict for the past 2 decades.
Sounds pretty neutral, right? A neutral guy saying neutral things about a conflict that everybody is neutral on. Is it neutral that the BBC failed to mention that Matthew Bryza also used to be the US ambassador to Azerbaijan? Neutrality doesn't exist in a vacuum. Every single headline, you can look, every single headline always uses impersonal language where there's not a clear subject and object. That's a problem. I want to read a quote from that article again. While it may be tempting for the media to take an, quote, even-handed approach to reporting on the conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan, there is no equivalence in reality. The facts on the ground strongly suggest that Azerbaijan is responsible for the drastic escalation in violence. Not only does Armenia have nothing to gain from the renewed violence, in contrast to Azerbaijan, which would very much like to rewrite the status quo, but Azerbaijan tipped its hand by preparing for war before the conflict erupted. Accurately reporting is not only a matter of journalistic integrity, it has important repercussions for the behavior of regional players. False equivalence between Armenia and Azerbaijan only serves to embolden the Aliyev regime in Baku.
I think it's really easy for people who, especially if they don't have a lot of information about a situation or a geopolitical incident, in particular if it has, if there's a lot of historical precedent to it that perhaps feels overwhelming for people to understand. It's very tempting to think that the sort of general calls, the overall kind of calls for peace, or for both sides to cease fighting are the only reasonable response, without really ever understanding that when there's a power imbalance, when you call for peace, you are inherently deferring to the side of the aggressor. And that's true for any situation in which there's a power dynamic. When you call for peace in this kind of blanket way, you're obscuring the dynamics at play and you're legitimizing the aggressor's actions. And it's absolutely not the case that most folks, in my experience at least the friends or acquaintances that I have in Armenia, most folks want peace. Nobody wants war. That's not something that anyone wants, but it's not grounded in reality to think that you can get there by doing nothing when you're being attacked. And fundamentally, this is about an anti-colonial struggle for survival on the part of the people of Artsakh. And as we're seeing now, it's escalating and spilling over into Armenia proper as well. So this goes a whole lot deeper than this supposed dispute over quote unquote territory. This is about a long-term desire for complete land grab, and a desire to really perhaps even seeing the newly democratized Armenia as a threat in the region and wanting to exterminate Armenians. And a lot of the disinformation that's being spread is on the part of Azerbaijan is incredibly calculated to then kind of muddy reality, and later, after they've already bombed towns and villages in both Artsakh and in Armenia, so that they can point to the prior disinformation and just actual lies and false statements to say that their actions were either retaliatory or defensive. And at that point, because there's so little coverage anyway, nobody will really know what happened. People will just kind of follow whatever the major headlines are telling them, and think that just because that narrative is out there, that it must be correct.
Yeah, being a contrarian is not the same as being nuanced. And in a situation like this, it really only serves the interests of the colonizers, the aggressors, the fascists in power in Turkey right now. And I don't know. Do you expect there to be a change in the tone surrounding this with regards to Western media or politicians?
No, I don't think it's really about how this particular moment of violence is going. It's about the deeper seated and pre-existing political entanglement that the U.S. has with Turkey and with Azerbaijan because of oil and because of other political interests.
If Armenia had oil money in the way that Azerbaijan does, this whole situation would be different. If all the oil, flowed underground into Armenian territory, like, the whole situation would be different. Yeah.
Right.
So yes, in that sense, yes. Right. This is about where the money is and the systems of money flow that already exist. There's no way that people aren't gonna, politicians and the media, the way they talk to political experts, who are aligned with Western interests, is always so much more respectful. You saw it with the way that they talk to Nikol Pashinyan. It's like they talk to him like he's like a child, or that British journalist did anyways, and cutting him off, asking him the same questions over and over, not accepting at face value what he's saying, while then talking to an Azeri foreign minister, and just, oh, you said you want right of return for people who were kicked out of the region like decades ago, like that's all you want. That's what he said. He said we just want right of return.
I think that
He just unquestioningly supports it. The guy even offers a term. He's like, oh, you mean right of return?
I don't even know that the idea of Azeris not being allowed back there is even correct, and it's also pretty ironic considering that Azeris can come and go in Armenia as they please, but Armenians are forbidden from entering Azerbaijan, and just also understanding that there's a lot of Armenians who lived in Baku, who lived in all over, so are like people who can't go back to the homes that they grew up in, to their
Yeah.
to their parents and their grandparents' homes. Actually, I learned in a meeting tonight
Baku
that
is the
apparently
capital of Azerbaijan?
yes, it is, and apparently I learned earlier tonight that about 60% of the Armenians in Syracuse's Armenian church are Baku Armenians, and they were refugees in the early 90s for the most
Really?
part. Yeah, so significant numbers fled.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's not anything that's really obscure about this. I think it's fairly cut and dry what's happening. Aliyev is making clear his motivations for this.
Yeah.
The joint military drills that had happened earlier this year. He was
Between Turkey
referencing
and Azerbaijan, yes.
Yeah, Armenia should think about whether this was a coincidence or not. It's not cloudy. Like, this is not a situation where you can get away with both sidesism.
No. Absolutely not. And it's just a little footnote. That Left East article from
Didn't read it.
anti-war Azerbaijani leftist youth. As much as I agree with their anarchist framework that they're operating from, they tragically miss the point. They don't acknowledge the uneven ethnic tensions, which I think is probably also part of the nationalist propaganda machine in Azerbaijan. But I mean, if you need to prove that the hatred is not even, go to Instagram and look at some Azeri soldiers' Instagram pages. All right, it's very much focused anti-Armenian sentiments in a way that it's not coming from the other direction.
And the propaganda machine is rolling, like, even on social media. I mean, I showed you that music video.
Yes,
yesterday.
which it'd be great to describe because I couldn't find it today.
Oh, I was pointing it at the screen, so I didn't see it.
Oh, well, I can describe it. It was a Turkish singer singing about, I don't know what, but she was in army fatigues, and there was shots of, like, marching armies and
Oh, well, yeah.
hashtag Azerbaijan. And it came out since the 27th, during the conflict, right?
It came out, well, depending on what today is. I suppose it would have come out Tuesday.
Was that the...
If it was a day old yesterday, so yeah, it would have come out Tuesday.
Okay, so that was the day after the conflict began. I mean, it's not a coincidence. You know, the fasci elements of Turkey, they're celebrating this. The fasci people in, Azerbaijan, the military largely are celebrating, like, they're celebrating this violence. So, I mean, are you a fascist? Don't support that. Speak out against it. Anything else we wanted to say? Any closing statements, anybody?
Just that it's really important, especially for folks living in larger cities, when there are rallies or gatherings of any kind, to show up. I guess especially if like folks are hearing anyone that they know spreading misinformation that they've heard, to say something and to correct it, and to also educate themselves first, to be able to do so, and also donate if you're able to support the civilians whose homes have been bombed, and whose I was reading a news report that said that there's not a single family in Artsakh who doesn't have a family member who's fighting right now, and it sounds like a militaristic thing to support donating to an army, but like I said, it's both to support the impacted families and the army as well. And there's something very different about supporting an army in an anti-colonial effort versus supporting an imperialist state's military force. It just means something completely different. And of course, with the overall hope and intention, or with the overall hope that this will reach a peaceful end, but you can't just sit around and hope for peace to come.
Yeah, if one of you, I suppose it'd have to be Leo, since he has my phone number, could provide me with some links, I'll make sure they go in the description to where you can donate either time or money.
Yeah.
Wasn't it, Leo, in that BBC podcast that we were listening to where the news reporter was asking Nikol Pashinyan, who's the prime minister of Armenia, like why Armenia is fighting instead of trying to engage in peaceful negotiations. He said, like, because the people of Artsakh will be killed. It was just the most, almost like you'd laugh if it weren't so heartbreaking.
Now the skirmishes have started again, and it looks like it has the potential to spill over into a much more serious conflict. Why doesn't Armenia just say, we don't want to fight? Why don't you declare a unilateral ceasefire?
Because, as I said, Nagorno-Karabakh just now is under existential threat. If Nagorno-Karabakh won't fight, all Armenians in Nagorno-Karabakh will be killed without any exaggeration.